Welcome back to the last part of our study called The Beginning of Civilization. As we've been looking at Genesis chapter 4 here, today we'll finish. And as I conclude, I want us to consider what we can learn from Cain and his family line. What should we take away from the way of Cain? Well, let me quote Pastor Archibald Brown, because he can help us here. He said, first, it was a way of ignorance. He's talking about the way of Cain here. It was a way of ignorance. The way of Cain is the way of the world now. Cain's religion is now the most respectable and popular religion of the day. It involves no abasement in the dust, no humiliating confession of sinnership, no absolute dependence out of self. It flatters man's pride, exalts his reason, and just suits the carnal heart that wants a religion to make his respectability complete. Cain's religion is the curse of the day. It drugs men into insensibility and indifference. If they had none, there would perhaps be more hope for them. For when sinners were appealed to, they would feel that they were addressed. But as it is, they put themselves down as part of the religious world. And perhaps a better name could hardly be found to describe them. For they have a religious worldliness, or if you prefer the title, a worldly religiousness. It's a way of worldliness. He and his descendants busy themselves in trying to make this world a pleasant place of residence. And with the sound of the harp and the flute, the guilty man tries to drown the voice of his brother's blood. This is the way of Cain. This is just what the vast majority of mankind is doing, is trying in the business and pleasures of the city to find its all, forget its God, and drown unpleasant thoughts. Guilty Cain, with all his energies devoted to the building of a city away from the presence of God, is but a type of tens of thousands of the present day. Who can walk through our city in the daytime and mark the haggard, anxious faces of the bustling throng without seeing that to multitudes of them, this world is everything? The way of Cain is the way to hell. It is from no desire merely to try and frighten you that I use these words. As God's servant, I am bound to tell you the whole truth, however unpalatable it may be. If I did not warn you in all faithfulness of the end of the way of Cain, I might hear addressed to me the solemn words, your brother's blood cries to me from the ground. Besides which, how could the subject be complete without it? How is it possible to speak fully of any way without telling you where it leads to? The way of Cain is, I repeat, the way to hell. No scripture sheds one gleam of hope on the way of Cain. Alas, how full of horror is the thought that the way of Cain has been trod by thousands, and that perhaps the number of those who have frequented this tabernacle have already discovered its bitter termination. My dear friend, if you have Cain's religion, it's a bloodless one. And if you revel in Cain's pleasures, if you die like Cain, do not be surprised if you have Cain's end. Cain's religion can only result in Cain's hell. So that's Archibald Brown's quote. It's very true, very telling that the way of Cain, the way that he had set his face to head towards, building a city away from the presence of God, doing all these things apart from God, would only lead to eternity apart from God, which is hell. So my prayer is that this warning will result in the salvation of those that hear this. Know that there is a different way. You don't have to be in the way of Cain. You don't have to have a religiosity. You don't have to live that way. There is a different way. Believe on the promised one. Believe on the one that God promised in Genesis chapter 3 that would bruise the head of the serpent. Believe on him, and he will take care of you. He will save you. Trust in Jesus and follow his way. He has a different way. It's the godly way. It's the way of peace. It's the way of joy, of happiness. It's the way of justice. It's the way of goodness. That's the way of God. It's the way to heaven. The way of Cain, the way of the world, is the way to hell.